We are live at the Writing Action in Fantasy panel. We are excited to be here. I am excited to be here. I'm not sure everyone else is, but yeah, we're here. Looking forward to it. So we'll get started. Each one of you will introduce yourselves, give a little bit about what's going on, what you've got coming out, what came out, and then we'll get right into the action, so to say. So Chris, CM Carney, say hello.
Hey everybody, I'm CM Carney, or Chris. CM is my fancy author name, which is just my first and middle initial. I'm author of The Realms, which is Pharaoh King's the first book. Got 7 out in that so far, another 2 planned, hopefully next year, and then that series will be done. I have another series called The Quintessence, which is a lit RPG cultivation series, and then I'm working on a middle grade superhero Arthurian lit RPG series, which is a really long gibberishy name to it, with a partner of mine that's based on a series that we tried to bring to as a cartoon when we worked at an animation studio like 21 years ago. So that one's been percolating in my brain for decades now, literally. So glad to be finally getting that one out. But glad to be here and with all these awesome guys.
Excellent. Kevin.
I want to read Arthurian lit RPG. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kevin McLaughlin. Hey. I'm Kevin McLaughlin, probably best known for the Valhalla Online and Realms of Power and Fury lit RPG series. I write a lot of fantasy. I write a lot of science fiction too. That's the starship behind me here. And I've got, that was the original cover. It's been replaced now for Titan Online, which will be coming out soon.
Excellent. Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Uglent. I write The Good Guys and The Bad Guys, amongst some other projects in the works. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now.
That's it. All right. Jez.
Short and sweet there. Hello, everybody. As usual, I'm just sitting here drinking. For those of you who don't know me, I started with Brightblade. I've got the Underverse series, Rise of Mankind, which is more set in this world, and lately Arise. I'm currently working on Underverse 7, is just getting finished off at the moment with my editors, which is currently breaking them, which amuses me because it's not breaking me anymore. It's not their problem. I tend to write things and just go, fix that, and just send it away. I don't want that anymore. And then I'm on with Rise of Mankind 4-5. So yeah, I'm fairly busy, but just glad to be here, really. If you see me gradually getting lower and lower and slumping sideways throughout the night, that's because I'm just drinking while I'm doing this. Because it's late for me here. It's like, well, late. It's 9 o'clock, but I just don't really care. So,
well, luckily we got you on the early panel. When the next panel rolls around, you're just going to be ahead. Yeah. Rose.
Hey, everyone. I'm Rose Reynolds. TJ Reynolds is my active pen name. I also write under Atlas Kane. I don't know if I'm going to continue that one, but hey, what are you going to do? Jez is drinking booze, and I'm drinking a pumpkin spice latte. I think that's the vibe. I wrote Eternal Online, the Guild Core, and I got First Fist out, Seventh Bridge of the Heavens. Book 2 should be coming soon. Don't fucking ask when. That's good for now.
It'll be out when it's ready.
It'll be out when it's goddamn ready.
Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome, all of you. We're here to talk about writing action. And so, we've got, you all have a varied from Arthurian legends to spaceships to everything. There's a whole variety of action out there. So what is your focus on writing action in your novels, right? So when you're scripting out an action scene, what's your process? And we'll start with CM.
To me, I was actually thinking about my concept behind action before, and I thought that action should serve plot and come from character. And then I realized that sounded like a really asshole college professor that talks about epiphanies for half a semester. but I think it's kind of true. To me, it's not only does it need to move the story forward, but I think it needs to reveal character. And so I try to put myself into the mind of who I'm writing and what would they do in the specific situation, because I have various characters, like I'm sure all of you do, that would react very differently to whatever perceived threat is. Like Eric's Montana would just punch him or hit him with dwarf. Other ones of my characters are not necessarily the most physically talented, so they'd be more wise ass attempting to talk their way out of it before they stab you. But I think to make it good, it has to be interesting, original to a point, but it really needs to come from the person who is doing the action. Otherwise, it seems forced to me. And like a bad action movie, which of course I enjoy those, so whatever.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? Kevin, what's your process look like in scripting action? And it doesn't have to be fight scenes, but just action in general.
Well, for fight scenes, I cheat. I spent like 15 years studying Eastern martial arts, followed up by a bunch of years in the Army, followed up by a bunch of years after the Army doing Western martial arts, wearing like plate armor and hitting people with big swords. So I've actually been hit by a sword while wearing plate armor. Yeah, repeatedly.
Jealous of you.
Having done the stuff, it actually makes a huge difference, because even though you're not doing it for real. I had that experience back in the infantry. We'll pass on that with the swords. But having had the experience of even just practicing with weapons against other people, it makes a big difference in terms of knowing what works and what doesn't. Having watched some of the best swordsmen alive today practice, it makes a big difference in being able to write scenes that feel compelling and that are true, I guess.
Yeah. Eric, you want to give it a go?
I mean, I think I tend to write more bad action movie scenes.
I love your book, dude. So don't.
Well, I mean, but I think that, I tend to look at it from the point of view as if I was writing or watching a movie, and sort of I use it a lot to affect pacing and trying to find, building towards action sequences, especially with the good guys, where the focus is very much sort of physical violence, and less so with the bad guys, where it's a lot of trying to figure out how he can use magic or stealth to do something similar, or to have the end result. So I think I do a lot of kind of, I guess, hard-boiled and pulp is where I draw my influences there. So it's not the sort of realistic, but I do try to make sure there are consequences to the action. So I guess, yeah, that's the best way I could describe it.
Then you can easily get Bruce Willis to act in your film adaptations.
I don't know if you want to lower yourself to that level, really, Eric.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I could have, but he's retired now. Now it's just Nicolas Cage.
So having seen a few of Bruce Willis's latest films, I think it's a good thing he's retired, really.
Jez.
When people talk about sort of pacing and things like that through the book, I always find that really interesting, because I don't do any of that planning whatsoever. I just literally, I put myself in the characters, because, I mean, all of our characters are to some degree us, because we build a lot of what we know into them. So I sort of build into myself, I create a scene. So, sitting at the table, drinking the rum, or whatever it is, I create that scene all around the character, like a 360 view of a film. And then I start the camera rolling, and I just write what happens. So as things are happening, I'm sort of breaking it down to, okay, now there's a fight, very much Panzer, definitely. As the fight develops, it's a case of I'm going through, I've done some martial arts, I've done some very silly things in my life, in bar fights and other places and strange things. And I definitely didn't do anything in Crete, no matter what the Cretan police might say or any outstanding warrants might say. But after 9 years, they actually get rid of those licenses, those warrants. So that's totally fine if they haven't caught you. So, or they used to anyway. I'm not going back to find out. But yeah, I just build the whole world around where I am in the character, and I roll it forward. I find myself visualizing it and sort of going, you know, right, I'm holding the naginata like that, and then no, that doesn't bloody work. So maybe you twist, and that's how I find it's all like, oh, you do that, well, your arms are going to lock against you. That doesn't work. So change that grip around, and I spend a lot of time on YouTube. A fuck ton of time on YouTube watching things that you put a very specific search in for, and you start watching and you go, oh, that's brilliant, that's exactly what I wanted. Oh, what's this video?
And that's how you end up on serial killer lists. Yeah, right there you go.
If Carlin's about, I think he's a few on the list higher than I am.
Blood spray patterns, excellent. Yeah, got it. Rose.
Well, everyone else covered some good bases. I'm going to try and slip in somewhere. Jez talks about being in the character, and I think I do that part of the time, depending on how you want the narrative to kind of feel. If you want it to feel very much like you want to feel the dagger go across your MC's face, right, and cut the cheek, then you need to be in his flesh, and then kind of like twist and go for the solar plexus, right? So you just kind of do that. But then other times, I do very much like the pulp kind of route or cinematic route, where I think, what's it going to look like from 100 feet away or with CGI or something like that, and I like to alternate between the two depending on what feel I want. Yeah, and you just kind of got to flow with the action, make it work, you know.
Yeah. So okay, here we go. How do you determine when you should end a particular fight scene, not just when the bad guy is dead?
Hey, Groki.
Facebook question.
To me, it's when I start getting bored as a writer.
Let's start with Rose again, and we'll work our way back up. We'll do it snake style here.
When do you end? Sometimes I have to make myself fucking end. Because if you get like too caught up, you're like, what, 8K? No, I can't do a fist fight. That's 8K. Like, stop. You have to put a limit on yourself. Kevin, you mentioned the T word. That's an artsy word, truth. When the fight is supposed to end is when it ends. I'm really sorry, that's a shitty answer, but sometimes you just feel it. Like the rhythm of the scene sort of just comes to a collapse, and you get like a really good, you get that really syncopated last punch or something, or a snappy line. And sometimes you get surprised. You're like, oh shit, the fight didn't end. The chapter did. And then the next chapter starts, and then you get the whatever you need. So you got to go with like an organic, for me, an organic rhythmic based sort of, yeah. When it ends, it ends. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. It's very much a case of when I do it, I'm visualizing the whole fight. So you're going through it as it's happening. And sometimes you get to it and you go, wait a minute. Well, I know I had this guy coming in from the left-hand side. What happened with that? You definitely need meds for this. I don't know who you are, but you need meds. Always. If this is failing, you need double meds and just triple them, actually. Fuck it. So I then have to go back through sometimes through the fight scene and sort of reconstruct sections and adding in bits and pushing them out. And I don't know, I do it all sort of, it ends when it ends, really. I finish him and I perform a fatality. Damn right. If in doubt, every so often you do need something like really gory, massive to just sort of like, because I'm really technical like that.
I think for me, it's story based. Well, a mixture of story and character based, because you have to think about what the people in the fight, or monsters, whatever the case may be, like what their ultimate goals would be. I've seen plenty of. I haven't participated in many fights, but I've seen quite a few of them, and it's pretty rare to find two people who are willing to go to the death. Most times you're going to find someone's willing to either run away or give up. Animals, on the other hand, you know, or monsters or something that doesn't have the same sort of human qualities, that, you know, you have to think of what they would do. You know, what would a bear do in this sort of situation, and try to extrapolate from there. I mean, I guess you could also, like, sometimes, yeah, the chapter ends or the scene ends, but I guess I wouldn't necessarily would say that the fight always, like, there has to be a conclusion to the fight in some way. You just have to see what that is, based on the story and the characters.
So I think it's really cool how many discovery writers, pantsers we've got in this crew here. As I do that too, although I used to plot much more, and now I don't. And what I learned from doing that process, from moving from one to the other, was that there are certain beats, there are certain, like, pacings, and there is a certain length that this stuff should be, and you're either figuring it out intuitively as a discovery writer, hopefully, or you're pre-plotting it, and then it's written down in your notes about what the outline's supposed to look like, so you know that this fight's supposed to be about 3,000 words or whatever, because you beat that out in advance and set that up. So either way, you're either intuitively or intellectually approaching the situation. You're still doing pretty much the same thing, in my experience, and that is, like, having the action advance the plot, have the action advance story. So if a fight scene drags on for too long, then it's really steering you away from story. It's no longer advancing story. So the fight scene or action scene should last as long as it advances the story, and then end. I guess that's really what it comes down to. And knowing what that is mostly just a matter of writing a whole lot of books.
I mean, I agree with Kevin on that. And I kind of fluctuate between pantsing and plotting. I do a bit of both, in the sense that I not only generally in scenes, but in my books and even my series, I tend to know the ending, at least vaguely, before I ever begin it. Like, I've known how the Realms was ending since before I ever knew the character's name. That's how, for whatever reason, it comes to me. And scenes are generally the same way. Every once in a while, I'll have something. It's not usually action that sort of comes out of nowhere and surprises me. I've had a couple characters just introduce themselves. Where, like, literally a door opens and I'm like, oh, who the hell is this guy? Now I gotta write him. But with action and fights, I usually know the ending because I know what the outcome is that I'm looking for, that is advancing the plot. How I get there and the specific beats of the fight, I kind of make up as I go along. Like, I don't plot that heavily. So, and every once in a while, the ending will change, and if it is better, then I let it. And if not, I figure out a way to make it work. So.
Awesome. We have another Facebook question. Do you ever write a scene, read it, and go, no, that's too much. It's too over the top?
Not Jez.
Let's do it again. Let's throw some more madness in there.
Yeah. So we'll go back around this way, or if anyone wants to throw in comments here, we can go a little freeform. But ever go too much?
Not really, but I don't think don't have a reputation that, say, Jez or Eric do, for just having extremely epically awesome and sometimes ridiculous fight scenes, which is probably why they're good. I don't know if that's my forte per se, so I don't think I've written one that I went, nah, I got to pull that back. Sometimes I'm like, maybe I got to add more. So I think I might be a bit the opposite.
Kevin, you go over to that?
I'm where Chris is too. I think if I'm feeling like it's way over the top and completely overwhelming, then it's probably actually exactly where it needs to be. I mean, let's face it. In this genre, tends toward vibrant, pulpy, explosive action with, like, flashy stuff and crazy things happening, and that's one of the things that people really love about it. So, like, I've had to rise to that a little bit, shifting here from, like, more mainstream science fiction and fantasy. This is one of the things I've learned, coming to Lit RPG over the last few years is how to write, like, more explosive and just vibrant action scenes.
Eric?
Yes. I have.
Yes. We'll skip over Jez because we know the answer there. That's fine. Rose?
Yeah, we're doing that? Okay. It kind of just caught me off guard.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right. So I think the only time to pull back for me, sometimes you do need to go back and add more punch just because it's exciting, it's fun. But sometimes you want to have understated if you want to hit the reader in the stomach, if you want to make them feel fucking sick, right? So you get like Boromir, right? He had a really understated death. He died kind of like a bitch, right? He just got a bunch of arrows put him and he killed a bunch of people. That was cool. Sure, he helped a couple people escape, but you're like, this is fucking Boromir. He should have killed like a few commanders at least, right? That was understated. That was realism. It was disturbing, and it did exactly what it fucking needed to. That's one of the best scenes in the series.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, to be honest with you, but yeah, I see that.
All right, Jez, did you ever go over the top?
Never.
I am the soul of restraint. I am the soul of restraint. Well, sorry, I like restraint. It's slightly different.
There you go.
Yep, that's what I'm drinking.
Just
killing the same respawnable character over and over until that pit is full. Yes, I like that.
Sorry, I did that one more than once.
Fair, I'm reading these books, Eric's books, and I'm just sort of going, that's brilliant, that. I like that.
So with action, and we talked a little bit about the experience of what your experience is writing it, but how much is too much? What's your balance look like between action? You said moving things forward. What's your balance look like between action and dialogue? And do you have a set amount that you try to cram in, or are you just following the story? I mean, the Pantsers, I'm sure, are following the story, but what does that look like for you, balance wise? What makes it good? What's a good balance in that? And we'll start with CM.
I think for me, the story tells it. It's like I'm a big fan of attempting to find interesting ways to use powers or abilities that don't normally seem all that exciting or lethal. Like early on in Barrow King, one of the first magic items he gets is I think I call it the Ring of Air Shield. Like it allows him just a globe of air that can partially block things around him. Well, he ends up fighting a big troll kind of thing and is basically just about to die and shoves his hand in the thing's mouth and then activates the ring and, of course, blows his head up. That, to me, was almost immediately after giving him that ring, which was intended to be a defensive thing at first. I realized at some point I'm going to have to blow something's head up because it's just too fun. But from there, it's like I always think that you have to give the reader a bit of downtime. And our genre is really lucky because we have I can check my stats in my loot boxes or whatever. So you have that bit of downtime versus, traditional fantasy where you might just have to have two people talking about what just happened, which is, I mean, it's done well, it's great, but can be a little bit more tedious sometimes. So to me, it's just, you get what you got to do done for the action wise, and then you leave a little bit of break, except obviously at the end of the book where you just want to make them feel like they're going to be drowning in action and never get out, and then maybe you're nice at the end or maybe you're not.
Kevin, what's your balance look like?
Well, I'm one of those pantser types, so my balance, what I look for in my scenes, though, is I try to have every scene have some form of action. It's not always like punching somebody or shooting somebody action, but I have to have some kind of action in any scene because otherwise it's not really progressing. I don't feel like it's progressing the story usually. So that action might be two characters talking to each other where they figure something out or where they reveal something that wasn't known before. That's advancing the action. That's advancing the story and the plot. and the pacing balance between those different types of actions, those, you know, like which scenes, how many scenes in the story have actual fight action, and how many have a different kind of action. That depends on the story a lot in my mind. So like Realms of Power and Fury and Valhalla Online are both really, really super heavy on the fight scenes side of things. There's a fight scene in pretty much every chapter. It's just the way the flow of the story works. The Titan stories are a little bit more intellectual, and because I'm popping back and forth between the real world and a virtual world a little bit, there's more scenes that advance action in non-combat ways. So I think it does depend on the story a little bit.
I would say it's probably, so I originally came back to novel writing from spending a lot of time around television and focusing on writing for television. And there's a sort of a big concept of, you know, the writing for commercials and sort of those sorts of breaks, and how to do the flow between how to keep the viewer to come back after the commercial break. And so I guess in my head, I'm always thinking about how to do that ebb and flow to make sure that there is something to pull the reader into the next chapter, or the next book, as it were. And you do have to sort of deal with people being angry about cliffhangers, but I tend to just try to modulate how much action is in it so that the active parts feel active. Because if it's too much, even if it's too much of a rhythm or too much of one thing, it starts to feel monotonous.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. One thing for me that is your fault, by the way, Eric, is cliffhangers. Because basically, when I first started writing, I was of the opinion that, oh no, in this genre, it doesn't work to have cliffhangers. You have to have start, middle, end in one book. This is it. There you go. Boom, it's done. It's sort of all tied together in a nice little package. And when I started writing, when I did Brightblade, I did that to a degree. But writing the second book in the series, it was very much a case of, I've written this part of the book, and this is nearly 200,000 words long. And this is a good place to stop it, to then start writing book 3. But it's a case of, if I write more of this bit, to be able to explain where this is and where this joins and where the hell do I stop it? You know, this is going to go on forever. So instead it was a case of, all right, well, they're trying to get to this place. They're there. They're underneath it. That is it. Thanks very much. You've had the big fight scene for this part of the book. We'll cut it at that point. It was just beautiful, and Jez is ugly. Love you too, Paul. But it was a case of, I was sort of looking at that and going, when I do this, you know, are people going to go ballistic about the fact that I've stopped it at this point underneath the city rather than in the city and doing and moving on with the story? And Eric's stuff was doing sort of something quite similar. I was like, it works for him. He's doing really fucking well. That'll do me. I'll have a piece of that. Thanks very much. As to sort of pacing and timing and stuff, and I realized this a couple of days ago, that where I'm at the moment in the story that I'm working on, I'm at sort of the last section of it. And when somebody mentioned before, sort of, you can't have a fight scene that's like 5,000 words long, I know that I'm at that point now of writing the sort of the entrance into the final fight of the book. And so I've put aside 65,000 words of space for that. So I would disagree on the size of the fight, because this is going to be one long fucking drawn out fight. It's going to be peaks and troughs, but it's going to be just one big fuck off fight, basically, for about 65,000 words.
Oh, my turn. So we're all pretty cinematic in what we're drawing from. It seems like we all watch fucking movies. You can't really help it. Jez is like Guy Ritchie, right? Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
I do like
65K fucking fight scene, right? I like more like Kung Fu and I guess certain animes where I really like to have escalating levels of action. So who's seen, right, Kung Fu Panda when they had the dumpling fight? The dumpling fight was a classic fucking Kung Fu scene. I fucking loved it. It was very good because it showed like master versus pupil, right? You get a lot of characterization, and it was just very classic Chinese cinema. But then you get like, you know, main characters for a scrap in Alley, right? And you're like, oh no, this is the first one. Watch, he's going to get his ass kicked. And yeah, they just get totally brutalized. And then, you know, they got to grow up from that. So I like to sort of have the fight scenes make more and more higher stakes, right? Until you get to your 65K fucking bloodbath or whatever. And then the pacing is just still pretty organic for me. You gotta give rest between the spikes of stuff. Otherwise, like if you get bored of writing action yourself, Jesus, the reader's dead already. So I'm like, well, this is too much. This is too much. Okay. You know, you got to summarize something and then do some dialogue and something funny happens or something like that. So you got to change the flow. Yeah.
But don't you find it though, the way you feel that this is, I'm saying 65,000 because that's roughly what I've got left. I'm thinking in the book, but where you've got it to a point where you're writing this and you know that this is going to be a big fuck off section to go through, and you know that it takes you, I don't know, 10,000 words to describe a fight about this big. So you're just growing it really.
Yeah.
You just go, well, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. Fuck it.
Even in the middle of your big bloodbath, you take breaks, correct? You don't write 65,000 of like jab, slice, hook like that would.
Oh, yeah. No, this is going to be sort of. I can't really explain it without giving it away, but it's going to be. Yeah, it's going to be a big long fight. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. It's going to be a big.
I read, just as an example that's similar to that. I read a book at one point that was science fiction with the entire series leading up to this mess with a whole bunch of fleets all arriving in the same system, and the entire 100,000-word last book was just the final fight scene that all of the other books have been leading up to.
That's
essentially
pretty satisfying, though.
Yeah.
If it's that epic, that's satisfying as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a question for Kevin. Transition to lit RPG from science fiction, did you need to make compromises in your style to match reader expectations?
Compromises, no. I know that some people say, well, lit RPG isn't written as well, and that's why people are getting whatever. Honestly, I find that lit RPG readers are very discerning and know exactly what they like to read. And if you're not providing that, you're not gonna sell. So, compromises, no. Adjustments, yes. I went and read a lot of lit RPG books before I started writing any of it, because I really wanted to learn the tone and the vibe, the feel that people were using. So that's, that's really the answer, I think. Adjustments, yeah. Things tend to be a little more vibrant, a little bit more flamboyant, a little bit more energetic than a lot of, more mainstream fiction, which tends to be a little slower paced, a little bit more thoughtful. Honestly, I think that like fantasy lit RPGs a lot like the Swords and Sorcery books from the late pulp era. It's just about the fun, exciting adventures of these heroes kind of stuff. And I loved reading those. My dad had a couple boxes of those. So when I was a kid, I burned through all of them. And my mom didn't know I was reading all of these books, but so pulp fantasy really heavily impacted my early reading and therefore my writing.
Same.
Excellent. Another Facebook question. In lit RPG, stories tend to keep adding more and more abilities to try to keep action interesting. What are some techniques you use to add variety in action where you can't just keep giving them a new skill? Let's start with Rose.
CM or Chris, you mentioned something cool. So I like to use things for what they're not meant to be used as. That's just really fun or clever.
Yeah.
Or you just see what happens when their abilities are stripped back. Then you're like, well, okay, cool, a thumb gouge scene. And you get like main character like breaking through someone's skull, and then they get to get a new level of like, wow, that was super disturbing to do. And then you get some characterization in that. But yeah, just throwing new skills or new abilities, or I got a new ring, and then the next chapter you use the ring to save the day. That is what Deus Ex Machina. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's really fucking hard to read. That's like plot armor to the max, and it just really hurts. So you have to pretend you're not doing that, because we don't write main characters to kill them in the first book. That's not how it works. They all have plot armor. We just have to try and hide it. So.
Jez?
Yeah, for me, it basically comes down to the fact that I totally fucking forget. I'm just going to be honest here. I write it, I go, there you go. And it's like it comes out of here, down the arm, and into the keyboard, and then it's gone. And people will ask me things later on and go, when you did this, did you mean for it? I'm going, excuse me?
Yeah.
You what?
I did that.
Literally, I once it's out of my head and onto the keyboard, I've lost it. It's gone. So I go through and I try and come up with things. The amount of things that I have laid throughout Underverse and the other books with sort of like, use that later on, and I never fucking did. It was just ridiculous. The amount of times I've thought of, for example, a bag of holding, the amount of times I've planned for a character to be able to open that, put over somebody's head and go, fuck you, and close it. And I've never done it yet. Just doesn't happen. Somebody swings a punch and you go, hold the bag up, catch the fist, pull it open again, no fist.
12 authors in the chat have just added that to their next book. So
yeah.
it's done.
I'm going to release it because I never will.
I mean, I have the same problem. There's lots of times that I wind up giving something to a character and I completely forgot about it, which irritates readers to no end. I still get hate about some of the things I forgot about. I think a lot of it for me is setting up a character at the beginning of a book and then seeing how they develop what they already have through that book, and then getting new things through the book that are then used in the following book.
Yeah. Kevin?
Yeah. Boy.
Forgot the question.
I'm just kind of drawing a blank a little bit. It's because maybe this is something actually because of my background, because I had written like several dozen regular science fiction and fantasy books first, where I didn't have that going on. It's a little bit, I have to actually add in the stuff. So for me, it's more natural to not have a character doing deep progression than it is for a character to be doing deep progression, if that makes any sense. My habit, my background comes from, or originally from, like not having like new powers popping up every other chapter. And so for me, I have to think of it still a little bit about adding those things, which means that I don't have to worry about, not about adding too many of them. I have to worry about not adding enough, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I think for me, my favorite thing is to try to mix powers that don't seem to go together in interesting ways. I have a bunch of notes for the realms that have never made it into books of like, okay, combine this with this, or like I was really excited because some of you more successful guys might have that thing that pop up underneath on Amazon page of the quotes that people have underlined that have popped up recently. That only happened to me like last week, and I was super excited about it because one of my whole philosophies about this genre kind of was put in the quote that basically said it's not power that matters, it's the application of it. And that kind of came from the idea that I think was big in World of Warcraft, where a level 29 is not going to beat a level 32. I've had a level 5 beat a level 40, and people get grumpy about it sometimes. But to me, that was a conscious choice because I don't give a crap if you're the Hulk. If you can't figure out a smart way to use that power, then somebody who is a lot less powerful that knows how to use their powers or knows your weakness is going to be able to take you down. So that's a lot more interesting to me. So that is kind of facilitated all of the ways even the powers I give my characters that come from that, because I come up with what would be cool if I mix that with that. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like psychoalchemy in a weird way. It's like just become, what's the stupidest thing that can happen with this power that is sort of logical and will advance the plot, and then I try to do that. And again, I said I've got a bunch of notes of things like that I have never been able to use, which will maybe get used in the last 2 books of the Realms, or maybe in something else. But that's a lot of fun for me because I have a heavy Dungeons and Dragons background, and then so to me it's not just like video game power. brute force. It's using it creatively, and I find that to be a lot more interesting. And I like that in the books that I read from people. And I think Eric does that a lot. And it makes me laugh usually when he does, because it's usually something stupid and awesome.
I know as a reader, I love seeing the simplest powers turn into the craziest situations through the author's creativity. That really gets me going. If I can't see it coming, I love it. And so we got another Facebook question from Sharon. How do you choose a narrator for action-heavy audiobooks? Let's go CM again.
I chose I didn't really care about being action heavy or not when I chose it. I chose my narrator because I really liked his work on Viridian Gate Online. I have Armin Taylor does, and he just has that deep gravelly voice. And when I created Griff, in my mind, he was basically Kevin Conroy's Batman meets what's Caviezel's name from that Person of Interest show. That was basically what Griff was. So he had that sort of deep, intense way of talking. And when I first started talking to Armin, we went back and forth on stuff, and he wasn't quite getting it right until I finally said, I'm like, I don't know why I didn't tell you this from the beginning. This is how I designed it. It's basically Kevin Conroy's Batman. He's like, got it. And then he knocked it out of the park since then. So I basically chose a narrator who, at that time, I could afford, for one, and was available, because Nick Podell was too pricey and not available. And I love Nick Podell, but I think Armin destroyed the series. He just did can't imagine the series audiobooks without his voice. It's how I hear it now. When I'm writing Griff, I hear Griff's voice in my head. So I just went with what I liked and what I thought worked. I didn't really go, okay, this guy does action really well. It just was kind of my second choice right off the bat. Was my second choice probably would have been Podell if I knew I couldn't afford him and he wasn't available. So went to Armin and said, do you want to do this? And he said, yeah. And there was no other decision making for me. It was just, I liked his work and thought he would do a good job.
Kevin, did action play into your decision making?
Nope. My audiobooks are through Podium and Tantor. So they send me a couple of narrator samples to listen to. I pick the one that I think sounds best for the character voice, and then I ask them to use that one. And so far, it's actually worked out pretty well for me. I do want to start doing some more of my own audio too. So I'm going to be listening very carefully to people's tips here.
Eric, did it play in for you?
Nope, I go with Tantor, so I listened to who they suggested and picked the best one, and was really lucky.
Cool. Jez?
Yes and no, very much. My first series with Wayne brings a lot of passion and brutality to it. So I'll be honest, the first two books in the series are actually getting re-recorded. The whole series is getting re-recorded, but with the same narrator, because the original first two books, the sound balancing was a real issue. And when I did it with Tantor, they obviously have full control over it. We basically, if you don't know, when you deal with certain publishers, you basically hand over the rights and you just get a check and told that's what we're doing. And it was like, oh, thanks very much. But while I love Wayne's performance, the sound balancing wasn't right. So it'd be very, very quiet 1 minute, it'd be reading sort of details or having a conversation, and then he'd read off sort of a stat sheet and now we've got this. And so the volume was, people would be cranking the volume up, and then they'd be cranking the volume back down, and then the volume back up, and then the volume back down. So when I had this out with Tantor, they tried to redo it to get it right. And then when it still wasn't really what we wanted, what either of us wanted on this, they agreed to just redo it. But at that point, I was already planning to redo the omnibus editions. So we did those as second editions, essentially. So the Tantor could then redo the first two books. They really liked the changes and said, hey, look, what we're going to do, we'll just do the whole lot. We'll redo the entire lot. So it's still Wayne doing his energetic and run, hey, sort of performance, but it's the audio balancing is a lot better. And seeing as book 1 and 2 were the issues, 3 onwards were great, but they decided if we're going to do this to the second editions, we'll just do it the whole lot. Don't worry about it, which was great of them, to be fair. I was really pleased with that. So that was sort of the first series that I've done. That's getting re-recorded at the minute. It'll be out soon for the first 2 books, and then over the next few months, they'll be doing more. I got Neil Helliger's that Eric has as well to do Rise of Mankind, because with Tantor they sort of suggested a few people, and we talked about different people. I'd actually at that point spoken to Chris Boucher and Jessica Threet, who also did Challenger's Call, who are fantastic. I'd spoken to them and I wanted them to do it, but Tantor don't do dramatized productions. So when they suggested Neil, I was like, okay, let's listen to it. I know I've heard Neil before, but I haven't spent a great deal of time with him. And he sort of read off about 10 minutes of a chapter, and I listened to it in bed with my wife. And I thought, this is fantastic, but this is me. Am I listening to this and I going, oh, I can have Neil, I want to have Neil. So I played it for my wife, and she lasted about 30 seconds. She's like, I don't care what the story's about. She's never read one of my books. Said, I don't care what's going on. Don't care. I like him. Have him. I was like, that'll do me. So at that point, I'd sort of gone through, we see Neil's doing that one. And then with my Arise series, I really wanted male and female narration. And I'd heard Chris and Jessica doing Challenger's Call for Nathan A. Thompson, and they just blew it out the park. Absolutely. If you haven't read it or heard it, seriously make the effort and get it. It's brilliant. And hearing them do it, I was just like, oh, I've got to have these guys. So because I'd already spoken to them about doing the role for me, and then it fell through with Rise of Mankind, I actually just turned around to them and said, look, are you still up for working with me? Yeah, great. Fantastic. I will write a story just for you. And that's how Rise came about. And I just wrote the stories just for them, essentially, which we did through Podium, and they've been great. So, can't go wrong.
Nice. Rose, did action play into any...
Of course not. The question was interesting, but kind of missed some things there. I got my break into Lit RPG because of my narrator. So I was chatting with Athon Books, and then Andrea Parsnow was literally looking for a female lead book that was the length of the book that I had just finished. And I was like, fucking, I have one. And then I of course did like a final revision. I had I think 5 weeks to polish it and send it in. So I got really lucky by getting Andy. It's just probably never going to happen again, but I fucking love you, Andy. And everyone has really good reasons that they already talked about. Another thing that's really nice is to have someone that you don't dislike. Andrea Parsnow is awesome. She puts a lot of passion in it, and she's a very human, kind person. I choose Steve Campbell legit. I mean, I did like his voice. I love his performances, and I kind of pictured a couple of my characters in his voice, and I thought that'd be great. But, he's Canadian. That was like his... He's as nice as you'd imagine, and very, very professional, awesome dude. And then I ended up working with Daniel and Rebecca Woods with Towers of Acalia and Atlas Kane. Podium just sort of came up with them, and I was like, just approved. That seems cool. And so then when I did First Fist, I reached out to Daniel and said, you two killed it so much, let's do it again. So there's a lot to be said about an established rapport. It's not going to get fucked up. That they're going to treat you with respect. So that means a lot.
Yeah. So I've got a question here for each of you. What action scene that you've written is your favorite? What's the crowning achievement for your action career in writing? So we can. Let's start with Rose, and then we'll work our way back. You're muted, Rose.
Someone mentioned a Chubon in the comments and kind of threw me through it. What's our crowning achievement? Like our best action scene ever?
Yeah. What are you most proud of? What action scene?
Oh, Jesus, that's a total trick question. I think First Fist, I had a lot of fun. I grounded it in realism, but then I really wanted to bring like that wuxia, like Crouching Tiger feel where a lot was capable. And so I began First Fist. A lot of people, holy shit, did not like this. But I started with like a Western fantasy vibe. And I wanted to show the introduction of this new world. So without the gods and without access to actual cultivation, there was no true ascension. So the main character is like part of this really elite squad. He's battle hardened. He's all jacked up. He's at the end of his career. He can't really do much else. And they go on a mission that's basically not the best call because of the commander. And they encounter a cultivator, a real one. And so they try to chase the guy down in like a carriage or whatever, and they kill some archers on the top. And then the main character's like, those archers are fucking doing some next level shit. What's happening here? And then the carriage gets knocked over because the main character does a cool, like, chops a horse's head off or partially off, and then it crashes, right? But then everyone surrounds the carriage and the real fight begins, which is like the cultivator blows up like out the thing like 30 feet in the air, and there's this huge like dragon plume, and he's combining multiple elements and like animal forms at the same time, and he murders everyone. He just fucking kills so many people and super outnumbered, and these are really elite soldiers that are like not going to go down easily, so they do defeat him. But that was just a huge wake-up call, and the main character realized how small he was and everyone else. And that also gave him the injury that led to his, you know, losing his arm and everything. And then it shifts completely tone into the realm of cultivation, which I thought was really fun. If you ignore some of my 1 stars on that, it's like a good mix of, I think it's when the two worlds combine. That was what I really liked about that. So it was gritty realism mixed with fantasy. And that was my favorite so far.
Awesome. Jez?
That makes a lot of sense.
You pick one?
Probably one that I enjoyed the most would probably be Arise Alpha. So if a lot of the scenes in there, because of the base, because I don't write nice characters. My people, don't know if you can hear that. That's one of my sons crying there. My wife's gone through to him. I can just hear it in the background. Poor little bugger. Must have had a nightmare. So I don't write nice people. I write people that are a lot darker, who are trying to be nice, who are trying to be better than they are, who've made mistakes and who are just trying to get the hell on with their life. Steve is an ex-enforcer who's got some horrific powers and is basically, there's vampires, there's werewolves, there's all sorts, there's a lot of bad guys out there. And he's viewing it as if I can really unleash on these people, then I'm making the world a better place, and I get to really fuck with them at the same time. There you go, puppy. So I enjoy that one. Oh, my words just went off all bad things, I hope. It's the final fight scene of that. He basically has been very much turbocharged through a lot of things that are going on. I won't spoil it for anybody, but he gets to that point where he's just going, right. He finds the love of his life is actually there and is being held captive. And he just goes, you know what? I'm not fucking having this. And just goes, boom. And it's just him tearing his way through absolutely anything and everything that's between him and her, getting her and just going, I'm getting the fuck out of here. If any of you come close to me, I'm going to rip you in your arsehole. And I liked it because it was so organic the way it flowed. And as I'm writing it, and they're using like a 30 cal machine gun on him, and he's just like, yeah, I'm going to fucking hurt you for that. There's that whole sort of like, you know, dark god, essentially. You know, a lot of the theme that I use for him when I'm building the character and when I'm writing about it is a dark angel of retribution and vengeance. He's not taking any shit. He's just going to go, I'm going this way, that way. If you're between me and there, you're going to have a bad day, pal. And I really enjoy that.
Awesome. Eric?
I don't know that I'll ever get better than the dwarf chair.
So a round of applause for that, man.
Probably not. But I
will
will
always be known for that.
Awesome. Kevin, what do you have for us? What's your favorite action scene you've written?
I think that my favorite is well, let me explain first off. My favorite scenes in general are the ones that, like Rose was talking about, are really advance or demonstrate something important about the character. The really like action exposition through action, but like where we're really showing some level of growth or change or something deep and true about the character. So in the Valhalla Online series, we introduce a character in the first book called Gurgle. He's an NPC kobold, and he starts off as a very, very simple critter who, over the course of the books, gradually gets more and more complicated and picks up some additional powers and abilities along the way. Moving into the final battle for book 4, he actually goes back to the original kobold's site where he used to live, and to recruit all of his fellow kobolds to help fight in the big fight at the end of the book. And this is one of the only scenes in the entire series that's not written in the main POV. And he goes in as this dramatically changed being, and there's a brief fight, and he wins. And but it's comical, and at the same time, it really shows his growth. It really shows what this character has, how much this character has changed over the course of 4 books, and it's dramatic because it shows the shift. It shows where he was and where he is now. So I like that.
If you want Dwarf Chair, read the fucking books.
Yeah, you need to understand Dwarf Chair.
I think the book I had the most fun writing was Killing Time, which was not intended originally to be a full novel. It's the shortest of the bunch. It was originally designed as a reader magnet back when I was told I had to do one of those. But Lex, who ended up becoming the 1B main character of the Realms, wouldn't shut up. Like, he just kept talking, and I kept writing. And in that book, he gets stuck in a Groundhog's Day style time loop. And at the beginning, he doesn't know what the hell's going on. He's like, gets killed constantly. And that's when the loop reboots, is when he gets killed. I'd probably show about 40 or 50 deaths, but it's implied that there's a whole heck of a lot more. And majority of the action takes place in a pub in an inn, where slowly you learn all the characters are not what they seem. Like, there's a pyromaniac, there's a assassin who you didn't know was an assassin and hopefully didn't have any clue until it was revealed. There's a thug who's got warrants for getting too friendly with livestock. But towards the end of the main action, Lex has been through this time loop so many times and realized that it's basically consequenceless grinding, because he knows it's going to come back, except for the last time when he doesn't die. That's his whole goal, is to figure that. So eventually he comes in, and the whole action is just walk up, casually stab this person, cast a spell that way. He knows what's going to happen. So it's almost like lazy slapstick in a way, that he knows what's going to happen. Right. So it's like, and it was incredibly fun to write, and I was stupidly giggling to myself. Thankfully, I was living in Colorado by myself with just my dog, so nobody that actually likes me as a human being got to see me do this. But I just cackled myself writing that book, and hence the reason he never shut up. And I just kept going, and he basically went from completely useless power-wise to mildly OP because of the one weird ability that he has that allowed him to figure out what the hell is going on. And then it's going to be the major part of the ending of the series is because of that. But just I think the casual violence he had, and at one point he goes, yeah, I might have a problem. Like, when he looks around and realizes that he just basically killed all these people because he can't, and he knows it's going to reboot, and because he's going to get killed again. And how casual he gets to his imminent deaths was also sort of entertaining. So it wasn't a super action-y scene necessarily, but it was by far the most fun I had writing on.
Awesome. We have just a couple of seconds left. Anyone have anything coming out real quick that you want to pitch? Let's go through. Rose, what do you got coming that you want to pitch real quick?
First Fist 2 will come out eventually. It's not going to be called Second Fist. Don't make the stupid joke. Yeah.
First leg.
That's good.
First foot.
Jez, what do you got?
Underverse 7 I've got on the 6th of December. I've got a little one with Yonder that's just released. I've got a few things coming. There's just lots. I've been very busy.
Nice. Eric?
I'm under NDA, so I can't say anything.
Oh, fair enough.
Ooh, excited.
That's
Kevin.
cool, though. Final book in the Realms of Power and Fury series is coming out November 15th from LMVPN. And then as soon as I wrap book 3 of the Titan series, I'm going to do a Kickstarter for that and then release that. That one's going out through me, though.
Awesome.
Got Realms 7 or 9 and 8 and 9 will be out next year. Not sure when yet because I'm still plotting that. And the first of the Nightman and Page, which is the Arthurian thing I was talking about, we're going to be doing 3 of them and then trying to kickstart those. That's probably middle of next year. We're not quite sure when. I'm going to start giving out a whole bunch of ARC free ebooks just to, get people into it. Especially as kids. I mean, actually, I don't care who it is. If you're reading, you like it, and you want to buy it eventually, cool. It's a lot of fun. It's given me a stress relief because this year's been a little bit weird. But yeah, so that's nothing imminently around the corner, but a lot next year, I think.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thanks everyone that asked questions. There's a Discord link on the screen right now. If you want to continue asking questions, we'll be in there.
No.
So some of us will be in there, but we'll thank you all. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.